Good morning, everybody. Good morning. A warm welcome to our Christmas service. Merry Christmas to you all. May you be gifts to those you see, better than presents under a tree. May your faces smiling bright give off a glow like candlelight. You need no ribbon nor a bow. Your love is all that needs to show. Let this Christmas wish come true. May peace on earth begin with you. Merry Christmas. We have come to the last candle. The waiting is over. We hear the baby crying. We feel what Mary feels with the baby in her arms. We know we've met God in person, a person among us, weak and wanting, wise and growing. We know what is divine about being human, and what is human about being divine and powerful by being powerless. One last candle to be lit, one star shining in the sky, one child lying in a manger, one God among us, Emmanuel. Charlotte and Hannah, please light the 4 candles of Advent and the last candle of Christmas. Oh, thank you, Thomas, for helping.
She might blow them out.
Gee, it was one match, 5 candles. Well done, Charlotte. Very well. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Our scripture reading is from Luke 2, verses 1 to 7. Listen with me and find the words of truth. In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David, called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and the family of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged, and who was expecting a child. Whilst they were there, the time came for her to deliver the child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in bands of cloth, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. Here ends our reading from Scripture. Grass withers, flowers fade, and the word of truth lasts forever.
Thank you, Ken. The banality of the birth of Jesus is expressed in the 7th verse of our Scripture reading. There was no place for them. A husband, a pregnant wife, visitors to the city of David find no place. The Redeemer of the world has a manger as a cradle and a stable as a maternity ward. In our modern imagination, it seems, there is also no place for this story. During the past few days, an acrimonious debate has been raging on social media regarding its truth. It was correctly pointed out that verse 1 is inaccurate in claiming that the Emperor Augustus decreed a universal census. It never happened. Furthermore, it was pointed out, again accurately, that when Quirinius became governor of Syria, Jesus was already between 10 to 12 years old. The governor, therefore, could not have conducted a census when Mary was pregnant. And finally, we know for sure that there never was a policy requiring families to travel to the towns where their ancestors lived hundreds of years earlier to be counted in a census. And because of these historical inaccuracies, the birth story is written off as a lie and as propaganda. It has no place in the minds of modern people. They have it wrong. The story of Jesus' birth is 100% true, up to the moment that it is presented as history. The story presents an authentic new vision of a Messiah, a divine leader. And it is this idea that had no place in Jesus' time. Because most people expected somebody like the illustrious King David to liberate them. Jesus was the exact opposite. As Luke tells the story, he fits Jesus in minimally with some of the expectations of his time. The liberator would be male. He would come from the line of David. He would be born in David's city, Bethlehem. That's it. But this is where all the similarities end. The Jesus born in Bethlehem is the exact opposite of how a messianic king was expected to be. There was no place for him in David's city, no place in the mindset of the people of his time. The Hebrew Bible describes David as beautiful, strong, and handsome. In 1 Samuel 16 and 17, he is described as ruddy and handsome in appearance, a man of valor, a warrior. We don't know what Jesus looked like. However, Isaiah 53 was applied to Jesus in the New Testament to describe how he looked. And let me read a few verses. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by others, a man of suffering and acquainted with infirmity, and as one from whom others hide their faces. Jesus really did not look like a Messiah, so there was no place for him. King David, of course, lived in a palace built by the best carpenters and stonemasons of his time in Jerusalem. And when someone told Jesus along the road, "I will follow you wherever you go," Jesus answered, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." David had a palace. Jesus had the wrong address. There was no place for him. And King David, of course, was the ideal warrior king, skilled in using the slingshot, the sword, bow, and arrows, fighting people like the Syrians, Philistines, Ammonites, Edomites, and Amalekites. The number of people he slaughtered comes to a staggering 140,000 men. He personally killed 15 individuals, even having some of King Saul's sons ruthlessly killed. And Jesus never killed a single person. And the weapons Jesus used were persuasion, stories, not force, justice, not might, meekness, not hubris. There was no place for this meek Jesus. And worth mentioning is David's relationship to women. They are absolutely marginal. when he sees Bathsheba, wife of one of his commanders, bathing, he has her brought to his palace, as she did not have the power to say, no, this was an assault. David has her husband murdered and takes her as his wife. And in 1 and 2 Samuel, it is being told that David had relations with at least 20 women. He was really a stud. On the whole, there are no love stories. There are no romances, no wooing, no daring deeds for the sake of a beloved. In fact, at some stage, David avers that while in war, he and his men kept themselves clean from women. And his harem was a classic collection of beautiful women, good for his image and connections. Jesus is quite different. He had very special affiliations with women. Mary Magdalene and Johanna, together with some other women, traveled with him. He discussed theology with Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, as well as with an anonymous woman at a well in Samaria. And the daughter of a Canaanite woman was cured by Jesus. And for all these new ideas about women, there were no place. Typical of heroes would be the idea of male bonding. In David's story, he bonds with real men, warriors, noblemen, highly prized fighters, shrewd military advisors. And when his bosom friend Jonathan is killed, David declares that his love has been wonderful, better than the love of women. You know with whom Jesus bonded: fishermen, lepers, tax collectors, and street workers. And for this he was criticized and rejected. And when Jesus was arrested, his male companions cowardly ran away as fast as they could. There was no place for him. David is all about the alpha male, the macho hero. In Jung's terms, he cultivated his animus. Jesus wept over the death of his friend Lazarus and shed tears as he entered Jerusalem, anticipating the destruction of the temple. He washed the feet of his followers, and this showed that he was in touch with his anima, his softer female side, and there was no place for him. The God of David was a brutal tribal god, a military general acting violently and with a random brutality, even punishing one of David's wives with infertility because she laughed at David dancing in front of the ark. Jesus called God his Father. And when he hung on the cross, this God had no power except the power to love. Father, forgive them. This God was not tribal but universal, the God of all. And in the name of this God, Jesus put an end to an eye for an eye and replaced it with love for the enemy. For this new idea of God, there was no place. So the point of Jesus' birth story shows that there was no place for Jesus being a new type of liberator. He didn't have the looks or the right address. He used stories and persuasion, not might. He respected women, bonded with outsiders, was a cowboy that did cry, and he proclaimed a God who used the power of love. There was no place for him. I think that this story truly should have a place in our hearts. I find every single one of Jesus' anti-heroic qualities inspiring. Our obsession with good looks, with having the right address, with violence to solve problems, patriarchy, neglecting the poor and the powerless, telling our sons that cowboys don't cry, and worshipping a God, expressing our own prejudices, should have no place any longer. And things are changing. Partly, I am convinced because of the story of Bethlehem, because of the type of Messiah that Jesus was. It was only since the last part of the 20th century that females have been allowed to be ministers and elders and deacons in most churches. And one by one, it is still a trickle. Same-sex marriages are becoming acceptable in the Christian landscape. God is becoming more inclusive. The cause of the preservation of nature is being taken up by more and more from pulpits all over the world. Just think about it. For the first time, America is going to have a female who is also black as a vice president, Kamala Harris. Pete Buttigieg, a self-professed homosexual, has been appointed by Joe Biden as Secretary of Transportation. We have females as prime ministers of countries: Angela Merkel in Germany, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, Katrin Jacobsdottir in Iceland, Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh, Sarah Kuungo Galwa in Namibia, and openly gay are Xavier Bettel, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, and Ana Brnabic of Serbia. Slowly, we are finding a place for the ideas associated with Jesus. A poem by my favorite Christian poet, Jim Burklow, sums up the truth of the story of Jesus' birth. Christmas is the mythic story of a true turning point in the natural history of consciousness, celebrating the birth of unconditional compassion, the turn away from an eye for an eye, the passing of supernatural, superpower God, the rising of God with no power but love, a story of hope for the peaceable kingdom, activation for the foundation of a heavenly city on earth, poor shepherds and rich wise men brought to their knees in holy awe, made equals in eyes of divine love, seeing the universe in a grain of sand, finding the cosmos in a baby's hand, straining to listen to the angels' band. Amen.